This is Amy. I'm here with my dad, Jerry Wallace, and we just wanted to follow up on part 2 of our conversation that we started in regards to some of the journey, ministry life, family life, and the different things that we've seen God do over the years. So today I wanted to start with just some of the stories of ministry and the miracles that God did for us over the years, and particularly my parents. I guess they call them the Red Sea miracles. Those are the kind of like you're at a crossroad and you need something, otherwise you're going to go down. So Dad, how about you take a little bit of time and share some of the stories of the things you guys experienced over the years?
Well, thank you, Amy. It's a real privilege to be back with you again and share some stories. It's really been God's hand in our ministry so many times. It's been, wow. My dear Bonnie has made journals for 40 years of our ministry, and all those. These are just some of my own memories coming up right now in this little episode. But if we were to dig out those journals, we would see over and over again the hand of God extended to us. We were pretty green when we started out. We were just a couple of young people. We wanted to serve God and travel and minister. My Bonnie had traveled with her singing family, the Singing Edwards family, kind of a country gospel band. That was where last episode talked about how we met. And I had been traveling with Child Evangelism Fellowship, an organization where you kind of go in the backyard and talked about kind of taking those children and sharing the gospel with them in parks and everywhere along the road. And from that episode of Child Evangelism, I met some people that thought they would like me to come back to their community and hold some meetings in churches. And I thought, well, hey, I was young, and that was an exciting adventure to be on my own, traveling through the Northern Ontario and lots of different towns and villages and homes. And I drew these chalk pictures. I had an easel I had made, and these fluorescent chalks that would glow under the black light. And at that time in history, that was a pretty big event. You have this artist come to town, draw these glowing black light pictures in the dark, and share a little message. And that's where Bonnie joined us on the journey. We got married and we hitched up and took off together, her with her beautiful guitar and me with my chalk drawings, and we traveled here and there all over the place. Wonderful. But on that journey up north, I met this dear little lady who, she said, Jerry, I really believe that God's got his hand on you, and there's this man has died, a child evangelism. His name was Erlen Smith, and he had traveled for many years across Canada, and every winter he would go to Mexico, taught himself how to speak Spanish, and he would get on a little burro and go up into the hills and have meetings with children. Tremendous man. But he had gotten older, and he was looking for somebody to take over for him. And I'd never heard of him. He was a good Baptist, and I was a kind of a Methodist holiness background. We would have never crossed paths in our denominational, the way we worked. And this lady said, I think I'm going to send your name to the will, and I think you should get this stuff that he's got. Well, I was young and still single at that point in time, and I thought, yeah, well, whatever. That was nice of her to think about that. And so that journey, I had met Bonnie, and we eventually got engaged, and we were engaged, and we got the phone call from this executors to this will. They had taken my name. They were looking desperately for someone to fulfill this man's dreams of taking over his ministry. And they said, we want you to come to, I believe it was St. Catherine's maybe, and we want to meet with you. And I was like, oh boy, yeah, well, yeah, it was so kind of out of my realm. And so I picked up Bonnie. She lived in Wooler, Ontario, and on the 401. And I had fixed up this little cool van, Ford van. And it was kind of like a little hippie machine. Had a little bed in the back and shag carpet and little bubble windows. And I thought it was the totally as coolest little ministry vehicle. I had made a thing in the back to store my easel and put her guitar, and I had a little closet. Made this thing all up. I just felt like I was a totally cool guy driving down the road with this little hippie van. Me and my little soon-to-be wife. And we went there, sat down with these people, and they told us all about Uncle Earl and how he traveled around church after church after church all summer long. He had a parrot that, now you're not going to believe this, but he had a parrot that he had taught how to say Bible verses. Like, God is good, be kind. And he would bring the parrot into the children's meetings, and he was way ahead of his time. He used overhead projector slides that even the most modern church wasn't using in anywhere. I think it was like, the military were first using overhead projectors. He had these slides that he had made on, acetate, and we were just like, they said, anything you want from this is yours. We want you to be the acceptor of this will. I was a little overwhelmed. He had a big station wagon car, a 1972 Country Ford Squire station wagon. It had looked like wood siding on the side of it. It had a hood that was like about a mile long.
What year was this?
This would probably be, I don't know. Well, we were 79, yeah, just before we were married. And so I looked at this car, and he had a little trailer, like a little travel trailer that you could live in. And he had it all hooked up to this trailer. They said, everything you want, you can have. He had a big accordion and all kinds of children's tools. He said, everything's yours. And I just looked at them. I thought, oh, Lord, I don't know if I'm prepared for this. We had received a request to actually go and be a family pastor in a church. From his pastor, we had spoken there, and he'd fallen in love with us, and he thought, oh, you guys would be so great in a Free Methodist church. And I thought, well, that would be secure. We'd have a nice little place. But there was this bigger calling on our hearts to minister, to go out, to travel, and maybe it was a part of young foolishness, the thought to be on the road and traveling, just the two of us. And so the thought of this ministry, of this children's ministry, was a little bit of a side view from where we thought we would be. I never really thought I would be a children's worker. I always thought I liked young people, and I'd done youth meetings, and young people liked me with the chalk drawings, and I was young. And Bonnie was, singing some pretty current worship songs at that time. So to go into children's ministry was quite a change of track for us to think about. But then I had ministered with my mother. We talked about in our first episode about ministering with my mom, her getting to help me in this child evangelism. And I'd done the CEF, traveling around in the parks and everything. And so it really wasn't that far off of our initial calling or our desire. It was a big one for Bonnie. She had really sung for adults. So all of a sudden to be singing for children was a big change for her. And so we went away. I don't know where we went. I don't know how long we went away, and we prayed and held hands and looked at each other and thought, Lord, to take all this stuff, big car, trailer, all this equipment, and then go home and have it sit in the basement and, never drive the car around and think they'd phone us up a little while later. So how's it going? Well, we really, thanks for the gift, but we haven't done anything with it. So we really prayed and said, Lord, is this you speaking to us? Is this your gift to us? Is this your direction? Is this where you want us to go? And we just held on to each other as a young couple and thinking, oh, Lord, show us the way in this big adventure of starting out together and starting ministry, really. And it wasn't like joining a ministry. It was like branching out into a brand new ministry, our own ministry. And that was like huge. It's like, so we trusted the Lord and said, Lord, well, if this is your will, we're going to go back. And we talked to the executors and said, well, we're going to trust God with this whole adventure and believe he's been in your picking us out of several people to be the people that take the inheritance from dear Errol Smith. And so we went away from there, and they said, well, you're going to have to come back and pick all this stuff up. And I drove Bonnie back to Wooler with the little van, and thought it was a little bit of a, it was interesting because, I still had this pride, I'm a young guy and, wearing my cowboy hat and got my cowboy boots and driving around my cool hippie van, shag carpet and bed in the back. And all of a sudden to sell that and jump into this great big country squire wood on the side station wagon. It was like, okay, Lord, a little swallowing of the pride. A little bit
of humble pie.
Yeah, a little bit of the humble pie. And like pulling the travel trailer wasn't like this totally cool thing. It was pretty old, and Uncle Earl hadn't been like a mechanic very much. Everything was kind of stuck together with Scotch tape, and it leaked really bad, and there was no toilet in it, and it's just a little fold-out bed, and just kind of looked in there, kind of smelled like the old parrot. Though, by the way, the parrot had died. Bonnie was glad for that. She kind of said a silent amen. She didn't want to be taking care of a parrot. And what happened to the parrot, some of the neighborhood children, I guess, came to the trailer and started teaching it swear words through the window, and so all of a sudden in the children's ministry, he'd get the parrot out and say, okay, boys and girls, our little parrot here is going to share some Bible verses, and then he'd start swearing profusely. It's like, oh, dear. So poor little parrot had to be retired from public ministry at that point in time. But this man was way ahead of his time. I mean, he had a flying squirrel that he would bring to the children's meeting, and they'd throw this thing and it would fly through the air. The kids came by the hundreds to his meetings. He had his big, xylophone there, he'd play this. And he was just an innovator. He went to Mexico, and he had an old film projector, like back in the day, film projectors. And he taught these little Mexican children to make silent movies. And he made these little movies of, things happening, a little boy, jealous about another boy's bicycle and making a flat tire. And he had all these on big reels, like the big reels. He got them produced and put them, and then he would show these silent movies in the church way before the time of people showing movies in churches. He was was way ahead of his time. It was just, I couldn't believe it. And the interesting thing, about the whole thing is that he would have never picked me. He was a good Baptist and loved the Lord. And I believe a man way ahead of his time in serving God in his era. But if he had met me, I was from a very conservative, holiness, Arminian background, and his Calvinism background. He probably would have looked at me and said, well, you wouldn't fit with me, brother, because, you're from a different school of theology. And I was young, and I would probably say, well, Erland, that old accordion, we're not going to use that kind of thing, or that xylophone. My wife plays like a guitar, and she's more contemporary and all this. We probably would have not jived together, and it only had to happen because when he passed away, he had this desire, and the Lord chose us. Now, here's the interesting thing from this whole little episode about Uncle Earl. He had all these churches that had him come every summer for years and years and years and years. And he had like a 7-year cycle of his teaching. He would come to a church every 7, go through a 7-year cycle, and then he would kind of start through his curriculum again. He was very systematic. Wow. If we could meet the man today. I never met him, never knew him. I have love letters from his wife, and back in my memoirs there that we received. Just a tremendous dedicated man. And so here's what happened is we thought, well, let's send a letter out. And they actually, the executors of the will said, why don't you send a letter to all these churches where he had been, and maybe, because of our stamp of approval on you, they'll consider having you come to their church and take over for him. And so lo and behold, if we didn't send a little letter of an introduction showing Bonnie and I and her and a guitar and me and my little chalkboard, if we didn't start getting all these invitations that were out of the blue, and to all these Baptist churches, which was really, of course, Bonnie had played and sang in a lot of different denominations, but for me it was a very new experience and a learning experience. And these folks accepted us in, and so many of them had us back year after year and year after year, and became such dear, dear friends to us. So that was the beginning of the ministry, the way it unfolded miraculously for us. And in the journey, we were a faith ministry. We didn't believe in going into debt. We were going to trust God for every provision. And but we found out Uncle Earl had a lot of very, very large churches that were supporting him on his missionary travels and in his ministry. And so when we went to do ministry in some of those churches, they didn't think about us as in their offering kind of thing. They were figuring we were kind of like a part of a ministry that was supported. And so our offerings were pretty small. You might get $35 for a week of meetings, and kind of think, oh, Lord, okay, we've come all this way and traveled with this big, big car, and we're living in this little trailer parked behind churches, and wondering how we're going to make it. Many times, miraculously, we just, for us to buy peanut butter and a thing of ginger ale was a really, really big celebration in our little trailer. I don't know how we even survived. I guess we didn't. We were living on love back there in those days. And traveling with the Lord, we just were so excited to be out there ministering, going here and there, and loving children and learning. And we, a lot of trials and tribulations. And I remember one time, this is kind of a part of the miraculous. This whole trailer and van was the part of the miraculous, and how God had provided. And we were just like, I had an older minister come to me and say one day, he said, well, I don't know about you. You're this young, you just get stuff given to you. He said, I had to work, and I had to save for my, my little trailer that I have that I take to camp meeting. And I didn't know what to say to the older minister. I didn't have anything to do with it. It was really beyond my abilities to. I didn't send out a newsletter and that time and have.
We weren't asking for the 24-foot trailer. If you just send in your gift, then
there was none of that. We were very, and when we did start out sending out newsletters, we never ever once put on it what this is the end. If you don't send us money, we're never going to make it. We always used to give these positive, wonderful reports of what God was doing and trust God. And so we had our little trailer. It was an 18-foot trailer, a little travel air, I think it was. And we filled it up full of babies. That was when the babies started coming. And we made cribs and things, little compartments that we would put the babies in, like a little drawer would drop down from the ceiling, and we were putting the babies in there. And that was when, Amy, you were pretty little. You were up. We had a little thing up on the top of the trailer and kind of opened the door and put you kids in. It was like a cupboard. And people would come in our trailer and think, oh, land sakes, look at these people, how they're living. But God provided another trailer for us, a bigger trailer. And it was about, I don't know how big it was. It was about a 24-foot trailer. Through a miracle provision, dear friends of ours saw our need and said, Lord, the Wallaces need more room for their babies. And so through that, we were so excited. Wow, God has provided a bigger trailer. And then guess what happened? More babies came. Here we were traveling around all over the country, week after week. Back in that day, in the fall, we would go for like what they call the Children's Crusade. We would go for 5 days, 6 days, start on a Sunday and go through to a big grand finale on a Friday night. And kids came from the neighborhoods. It was an era of time that was just unbelievable. And we traveled around so many different denominations. We were in every kind of denomination you could believe of. We even had the opportunity to minister in a cult. And I think it was maybe northern New York. This dear friend of ours, he was announcing we were in the area, and they gave him a call. This cult leader found out that we did music and art, and she invited us to this creepy place. You wouldn't have believed it. Beads hanging from the ceiling and people lying around on the floor and cushions and incense burning and candles everywhere. We came in, we thought, oh my, Jesus, you've opened a door here into a pretty bizarre place. And I set up my easel and did this chalk picture. And Bonnie, she sang her worship songs, and they all were just looking at us. And there was a young man there. And this young man, he was probably in his 20s, sitting on this cushion on the floor. And we thought, oh, Lord, this poor boy, why is he here? He's trapped in this some kind of thing. And I preached a simple little gospel of the prodigal son and talked about the story so simply. And we knew that God was speaking to that boy. And we've thought about him since. Wonder where did the Lord get him out of there? Did he hear the call and escape from the clutches of that place? That was a pretty bizarre. We've been in some different bizarre places like that, but that was one. But we're kind of specifically talking about the Red Sea adventures here. And every time we came in our trailers getting smaller, and they got older, and we were saying, Lord, if you can make a way. We always thought we would like to have had a bus, or, we would see some of these evangelists traveling around in music groups, and they had these great big, beautiful coaches with chrome wheels. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to have one? We prayed, Lord, you could make a way for us to get one of those big buses. Please, Lord. But we traveled out west for a conference. I was to speak at a conference, a little holiness conference, a little church out in Tumbleweed Town. And we were out there. My wife was with me, and we had my son Daniel. I guess the rest, Amy and you, were back home being babysat. We had flown out, actually. And I had gotten up in the afternoon service and spoke about our ministry and what we were doing, and how he was leading us and providing for us. And there was a man sitting in the front seat, an elderly man. And as I finished speaking, he just got up, right up where he was, and he said, the Lord has spoken to me. I have a 28-foot travel trailer, a Regal trailer, is worth $32,000, and I have a custom Ford van. He said, it's yours. The Lord has spoken to me to give it to you right now. Wow. And I was standing on the platform. So, okay, I really wasn't Pentecostal, or, I was probably pretty conservative. But at that point in time, got pretty excited. I thought, bigger trailer, there's $32,000. My trailer is pretty old, and my vehicle was getting old, and this was just almost got into a charismatic dance. And I went down to him, and he said, I want you're flown out here, but you can drive it back to Ontario. I'm going to give it to you right away. my father, who had flown out for this conference with us, and my father despised flying. This was probably the only time he'd been on an airplane to get there. And he said, God has provided for a way for me to go back to Ontario without getting on an airplane. And so we went to this man's home. He said, we're going to have to do a transaction. Went to the license bureau, and it cost $1 for us to do the transaction.
Not today.
Yeah, they wouldn't allow that day back in there.
You'd have to pay the taxes.
Yeah, a trailer worth $32,000. It was a brand new Regal travel trailer. Oh, it was gorgeous. I felt like I was walking into the, Holiday Inn 5-star. I don't think Bonnie had seen it because she had to fly back. So she didn't know what the trailer looked like. And the Ford van, it had one of those custom raised roofs and, big captain seats, and it had a little toilet in the back. And, I thought, God is so amazing and we brought it back home. My father and I had a great bonding time traveling through the hills of Ontario and Saskatchewan, and got it back home, parked it in there, and invited people from around the community, come and look at what God has provided. And Sunday morning, in the little church, people came from near and far to come and look at this tremendous gift of what God had done. And we were so, it was God over and over again showing his provision, making a way. And we traveled all over the place with that trailer, big machine.
Did you say that one was the best trailer you had?
Well, actually, no, the middle trailer was probably the best trailer. This trailer, we had some difficulties with us. And then, lo and behold, we were getting ready to go have some meetings in Wellesley, Ontario with a dear friend of mine, Lloyd Rainey, a little church. And we were all packed up except me, procrastinator. All the children's clothes we had. I guess we had, Matthew wasn't born. We had, Daniel maybe was the youngest.
5 of us.
And we were getting ready to leave. And I had been working in the trailer, packing stuff. And it was in the springtime. I had a little heater in there, keeping the thing kind of warm. Daniel was outside, just a little toddler, playing in the trailer with me. And we looked out the window of the house where we were, and I saw smoke coming out of the trailer, and I thought, oh my, something's happened out there. I rushed out of the house, and by this time there was flames. Just the whole inside of the trailer was just ablaze. It was like a bomb had begun. I looked at it, I thought, oh God, where's my son? Where's my son? There was 2 doors. I go, a door at the front and a door at the back. It was a fairly big trailer. And I was just screaming at the top of my lungs, Daniel, Daniel. And I tried to go in. The flames burnt my forehead, and I couldn't go in. And I ran out to the back door, and as I ran to the back door to open the back door to see if he was in the back of the trailer, I saw him in the garage. He had wandered out of the trailer and gone into the garage. It was only God's provision that he got out of there. He would have never survived. And I think I grabbed him and threw him in the house, and I yelled at Bonnie, called 911. And by the time I got back outside, the trailer was just in a burning inferno. It was blowing up. And I tried to get the little garden hose, which in the spring still had ice in it, and I was trying to, it was hopeless. It burnt just totally. And the fire department got there very, very quickly, but there was no hope. It was gone. Totally destroyed. And so there was this beautiful, $1,000 provision and God's, and now it was gone. It was this burnt wreck of a hulk of a thing sitting in this laneway. Thinking, okay, where do we go from here, God? What's your plan?
I can still remember the smell of the burnt trailer.
Yeah. Oh, the smell was everywhere.
That smell, the smell of fire, very,
it's a whole,
especially when you're young, that goes into your memory.
Terrible smell. it causes a paranoia in you, because every time you smell smoke or anything like that after, you're so fearful. So everything was lost. Everything in the trailer, all the equipment and all your children's clothes were all gone. Some precious blankets, quilts that Granny had made were burnt. And
I remember My Little Pony. That was the only thing I could remember. I lost My Little Pony. It was this little yellow My Little Pony, and it had little wings on it. And I think I had just gotten it. That's the only thing I can remember losing, but it melted in the fire.
So my mother, a dear Christian lady, Joyce, had been a great influence in my life. And every time, whenever I kind of come to the end of myself and I would be in despair, we prayed for God's provision many times. And sometimes God doesn't come through just the way you think, or for sure not at the time that you would like him to come through. We think, Lord, we need you. The Bible says, about the psalmist, he said, Lord, deliver me speedily. I used to go to that scripture, Lord, you know what that means, speedily? It's like a NASCAR going around the track. Speedily, Lord. I need speed here in this episode right in my life, And it seemed like God was like on a tricycle somewhere way off in the distance, kind of puddling along, and I needed him now. And so, having those faith to wait and trust. And we had an old brown van that, well, actually what happened, we got insurance money from the trailer.
And what does Nanny always used to say? Well,
this is where I'm coming to. I would be in despair, and she'd say, what is in your hand, son? What is in your hand? I never really liked her calm little answer she had this sweet little look on her face. I don't have anything in my hand. What are you talking about? She said, oh, dear, you have something in your hand. She would give me these illustrations, like Moses with the rod and, Samson with the jawbone. And I don't have anything. I don't have any money. I'm broke. And, well, what do you have in your hand? Oh, and then go back home. And Bonnie was always very hopeful. And, well, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. Lord's going to see us through. And so we were able to buy, through this trailer insurance, we were able to buy a van. Wonderful van for children, vinyl seats and rubber floors, and, absolutely no extras on it. I think it maybe had a radio. That was a big feature, roll down windows, and no air conditioning. You guys sweated in the back of that thing. We were going big trips and just dying, these little clip out windows. But from there, it was like, Lord, show us the way. And so what happened is that burnt trailer sat in our yard for so long. And I don't know where that came from, but we got this idea. What if we were to, because the insurance company was going to take it away. And I said to the insurance company, what if I kept the trailer? Could I buy it back off of you guys? And they looked at me like, you want to keep this old burnt trailer, this great big thing sitting in your yard? And I said, yeah, I want to keep it. And people thought, what in the world is it going to do with it? Try and build a new trailer? And I had this thought of, what if we cleared off all that burnt thing? Because the bottom of the trailer, the wheels and everything were still intact. And what if we cleared it all off and made like a platform? And we could take it around I could make a big easel, and Bonnie, we could get a sound system, and we could take it around to parking lots, and we could have outdoor drive-in church on Sunday night. We could really make it fancy looking. We got my father and my Bonnie's brother, Scott Edwards. He was helping us for the summer, and he helped us. We cleared off all the burnt stuff, took it to the dump actually, and just tore it all off, took it back home, and we put this beautiful green grass on it and made this beautiful, beautiful trailer. And so I made this big easel, big chalk easel, 4 feet by 8 feet, big piece of plywood. And we got a sound system, and we announce in the community, we're going to have drive-in church on Sunday night, And people came from all over with their cars. It was like totally cool. Nobody had ever done this before. We'd have young teenagers come in, honk their horn at us, park there, and drive away for a little while, And all around the neighborhood, because we had this big PA system just blasting out seniors' homes and neighborhood homes all around. We never got any complaints. It was just a wonderful episode. Then we made a roof on it, because every time we go to do it, you think it's going to rain, and we made this really cool roof was on it. It was just a real exciting episode in our lives of God taking the thing in our life that, burnt embers, how he can take the messed up things, the broken things of our lives and turn them for his glory and for his honor. It's only God can do that. It's only his vision. We come to places in our lives where we're broken, and, we feel like disappointments of life or tragedies happen in our lives, health, sickness. Where are we, Lord? You can't do anything with me now. We're in this episode. And God says, just give me the little loaves and fishes, Jerry. Little loaves. They sang that at my ordination when I became ordained as a minister. Little is much when God is in it. And we saw that time and time again. One more, going on with vehicles, we had cars given to us. The senior couple in Ottawa phoned us up one day and they said, we bought a new vehicle and we want you to have our old car. And Bonnie had been praying for a little car to travel around doing ministry. And I thought, Bonnie, I don't know if we should, should we accept this? It could be a piece of junk. We're going to go and accept some old relic, and it's going to cost us a fortune to fix it up. And so she was always very optimistic, very hopeful, still is. And I would be this doubter, kind of dragging my feet, going along, all right, we'll go in there and visit these people. And we drove in there, and they had this beautiful little Toyota car that they were going to get. They'd bought a brand new Toyota car, and they just kept it instead of, trading it in. And Bonnie was so excited. And that car, that little Toyota was a miracle machine. It went for miles and miles and miles and miles. She put her guitar in that, throw it in the back, and go to seniors' homes and sing all over the place. What a blessing it was. We actually got our sons took it over. I think Daniel drove it till we thought it was going to drive for a minute. And then Matthew took it over. That little car lasted. It was a miracle machine. We thank God for those provisions. And then we were sitting in the house one day, and I was driving a school bus part-time to help make ends meet. And Bonnie looked at the school bus. She said, well, let's buy a school bus, and turned it into a motorhome.
Project for you.
Yeah. She was the visionary. And I looked at her and I laughed. I said, yeah, sure. We're going to buy a school bus. Didn't have hardly any money. Back in the day, we used to get these child bonuses, the baby bonus would kind of collect at the end of the summer or something. You get $5,000 or $6,000 or something. You had 6 kids, so you got a lot of money. And so I said, well, look, we could take the baby bonus and we'll buy a school bus. And so I thought, well, there's my Bonnie again. And everybody I talked to said, sheesh, you're a fool. School buses are just money traps. You don't want to buy one of those. Everybody we talked to, but there was one fellow, his name was Steve Lyle, and he said, Jerry, I think it's God. He wants you to buy a school bus. And and it resonated with us. It was like he was a man of faith, and we thought that, people will come with reasoning, and they'll come with all their thoughts and even with good thoughts. But if it's not God, you'll know. And when he speaks the word to you and it resonates with your soul, and you say, Lord, this is a confirmation. So I went to my bus company where I was driving the school bus. I think it was Travelways maybe back at that time. And I said, you got any school buses you're selling? And they said, oh, we got a bunch out there in the back lot. Go take a look. And there was 5 or 6 buses. And I walked around and I thought, how in the world am I know what kind of bus to buy? You know, like these are old buses that have been driven the life out of them for, I don't know, at that point in time, they were gas motors and, you know, you're only allowed to drive them for about 7 years. And so I'm walking around thinking, oh, Lord, you know, how in the world am I going to know? And just that moment of time, the school bus mechanic was out in the yard and he had one of the buses open. He had the lid open. I said, I'm here looking to buy a bus. Could you give me any suggestions of where, you know, what bus would? He said, well, this bus here, he said, it hasn't got an alternator on it, but it runs like a charm. And he said, we've gone through it all, actually, to be driven for another year. Brakes, exhaust, everything has just been tuned up. It's ready to go. And he said, probably if you got an alternator and threw it on here and start this baby up, I would advise this bus right here. So I thought, wow, there's an inside track. So I went and told them, I said, I'm going to buy that bus out there, but I need to get an alternator. They said, well, they weren't going to put one on for me. So I went and bought an alternator and put it on. Pretty simple procedure back there, big gas motor, and got the alternator on. And I got in, you know, fear and trepidation because I hadn't heard it run. Turned the key, you know, and great big gas motor. I think it was like a 462 or something like that. And there it started right up and it was running. I was so excited. I thought, oh, and I went in to the guy, said, oh, here, you know, $500, he said, $500. He said, you're a bus driver, so we give you a deal, $500 off. They were going to sell it for $1,000 back in that day. And then a guy came in, he said, no, you can't sell that bus. And to the guy with the papers, and he said, that bus is not to be sold. What is it doing back out there? We're driving that bus this year. And the guy said, no, it's too late. We sold this bus. It's his. And so I drove away with this big school bus. It was quite an event for me to be driving down the road in my own big yellow school bus. I looked in the mirror and all these seats behind me. Thought, what?
What have I done?
What have I done? I had to go and get a safety check, you know, at a bus company. And I pulled in the garage thinking, oh, Lord, watch over me. I didn't have any, you know, I had no money hardly at all. I thought if they gave me a big bill, they could take me for this huge ride. And the guy was so sympathetic. He said, what are you going to do with the bus? I said, well, I guess I'm going to try and make a little motorhome out of it or something. Oh, wow, what a great adventure you're going to have. You know, he said, I think it needs a new mud flap on the back. And I got some old ones here you can put on. And that was it. A mud flap, you know. I think he charged me maybe $10 and plus this safety fee. So I'm driving home just like thinking, dear Bonnie, I hope you've heard from God, and flumping down the road, this big old bus pounding away, pulled it in the yard. There it sat, this big yellow monster, thinking. And that day, you know, it wasn't cool for people to, you know, you could go on YouTube and look what they did this to their bus, and look at that little small living exercise.
Yeah, now tiny homes are quite popular. You were ahead of your time.
There was nobody, you know, the internet was non-existent. And the only thing is we lived in trailers. So I thought, well, you know, kind of I could think about like a trailer, what it would look like inside of a trailer. And so that was my formulation. And so we began to, I think the first day I started taking seats out, and I thought, oh, Lord, what have we done? They were all rusted in this bus. And, you know, trying to get one seat out took me about like an hour and a half. And I thought, what have I gotten myself into? Or just, I didn't know anything about electrical. I didn't know anything about plumbing. You know, I didn't know anything. I knew I was going to have to do some welding, and I wanted to make bins under it. I had never welded in my life. And this huge adventure, there was no like, oh, let's Google that, see how we can figure that to do that. It was like,
watch a couple YouTube videos.
Yeah, ask somebody, you know, what do you think I should do here? So there was a farmer up the road, and he had a torch, and I drove the bus up. I said, do you think you could help me cut these seats out? Oh, Jerry, yeah, no problem. He got underneath there and sparks were flying and almost burnt the floor out of it, but we got all those seats out. And he took a bunch of those seats for steel, and we kept some for seats in the bus, and then we made a counter and put a bathroom in eventually and bunk beds, and we split the back. We had a toilet in there and a shower. Amy would come to me, "Oh, I just know we're never going to have a shower." She was kind of one of these, she was hopeful, but she didn't want to really express her hope because she thought she'd get disappointed. So, "I know we'll never have a shower and we'll never have hot water." And so we got a little hot water heater and put a furnace in it and got a...
You're never going to be done with the bus.
Yeah.
I don't know how old I was.
Yeah,
like 12,
it was. Well,
13?
It was a venture for sure. It took time. I think every year we do some more renovations. And I really didn't think we would have it that long. I just really thought it was a short period of time. And we drove that thing for...
At least 10 years, right?
13 years.
Oh, 13.
13 years. Drove it all the way to Florida, through the hills of West Virginia, and through the East Coast. And we never had a breakdown on the highway. Never had a breakdown. One time we were in Indiana at this church. God had opened doors in the States miraculously for us. Little churches. And we were down in Indiana, and we were heading for the mountains of West Virginia. We were going to be going to this little hillbilly church in the middle of the valley of the mountains of West Virginia. Didn't know where we were. We didn't have GPS maps. So Bonnie was my map GPS lady. And get the maps laid out there, these little back roads, and driving up and down the mountains. But before we were leaving, there's a guy in the church. He was a big, huge man. He was a mechanic. He says, "You want to bring that thing over here to my garage? I got a garage here, Jerry, and we'll take a look underneath that bus. We'll check it out for you, And I thought, well, that would be great, just keep tip-top on the bus. He got crawling around underneath, and he said, "Jerry, I'm glad you didn't head for those hills. West Virginia, the brake lines are all rusty, and some of them are leaking. You would have hammered on those brakes, and those things would have busted, and you would have been flying down the hills." And there was actually literally one mountain we were going down. And Andrew came to me and he said, "Dad, something burning. And I said, "It's the brakes. We're going down this huge mountain." And I had it was just an automatic. I had it in low gear, and I was using the emergency brake, and I was using every time you let your foot off the brake, that thing, it was just like a jet engine taking off down that mountain. And we got down to the bottom of the mountain, and we made it successfully. It was just every creeping down at
I remember that trip.
Snail's pace. And we looked at this mountain at the bottom. There was a big rock face, and it was covered full of red crosses. I asked somebody later, I said, "What was all those?" He said, "That's people that have lost their lives smashing into that mountain, probably truckers that lost their brakes." And I thought, oh, thank God we got down. Miraculous. Wonderful opportunities we had in the hillbillies of West Virginia back in that day. Poor folk. Well, we'll talk about provision. Here's a story provision for you. We would have these meetings, and they were just poor folk. And they would come from miles around. Beautiful, beautiful people. We're in this little church, this picturesque little white church in a valley with a little creek running by it. And here we are, we're Canadians in this big old white school bus. It was probably kind of a novelty, who these Canadians were with this, living in this blue and white school bus that we had painted, my father and I, and all the children. Bonnie helped us. That was quite an undertaking in itself, painting a school bus. And people would come every night to these meetings. We were there for a week. And there was no set fees. We didn't have a say, well, we'll come we'll come to your church for a week for $1,000 or something, This is what we need. There was no mention of money whatsoever. Never even a glimmer. And he said, "Well, brother, we're just going to take up an offering for you every night. Praise God. Trust the Lord." So every night they would take up an offering plate. People, these poor folk, would they would pile it up $1 bills, American $1 bills. You know, it was just quarters and nickels and dimes and throwing on the offering plate. And then he dumped the offering plate, you know, to us at the end of the night. Never looked at it. And there's your offering for tonight. You know, and we'd go through all those $1 bills and like, well, you know, made a whopping $30 tonight. Maybe by the end of the week we'll maybe reach 100. It took about $100 to fill up that old bus for gas. But every night, and so one night, here was a joke. We said, now you folks, you don't been so faithful to come out every night and bring in crowds of people with you. And we're going to, if you want to have a tour through our bus, tonight after church, you can line up at the door and go through the old bus there to check it out. And so, lo and behold, after church, I didn't think anybody would really want to look in the bus. There was a great big lineup of people.
Everybody wanted to look through the bus.
Look in the bus. And I'd made a joke, in the service. I said, well, when you go down to where Elvis Presley, he's got his old tour bus parked there, and I guess people go through and they throw their money on the table, kind of like as a honorarium to Elvis Presley. I made a joke about if you wanted to do that, you could do that. And lo and behold, if they hadn't thrown a bunch of money all over the kitchen table there, we were like, that was so funny. Oh, they were precious people. We went back to West Virginia numerous times. That school bus was,
it's a miracle it made it through there.
Yeah. There was a transition time. We were thinking you girls were getting, Jennifer and you were getting older, and, you were crammed in little bunk beds. They were just kind of like a ship where, the military in these little cots on the side. Everybody had just a few bins of clothes. Pretty hard for you. You were young teenagers, and very little clothes. We couldn't stop at garage sales on the road because Bonnie said, absolutely not. There's nothing coming in this bus any more than what we have in here. Mm-hmm. She was homeschooling you all. She had these bins of books, classroom books. And so we had very limited space. And so we thought, maybe if we buy a little trailer and pull it behind the bus, then maybe the girls could stay back there, or maybe Bonnie and I could stay back in the trailer, and there would be more room for the kids. And I thought, trailers and school buses, sometimes we would be down the wrong road looking for some place, and we'd have to back up, turn around, and majority of the time we were lost going through the states and trying to find places and turning around in the back roads. And so I thought with a little trailer behind backing up, that would be a catastrophe. And so I got thinking, well, what if we put something on the roof, like a roof cap or something? We made some kind of contraption on the roof that the girls could stay in. And so I thought, maybe a pickup truck back, one of those backs you put on the pickup truck. What if we put one of them on the roof? And I crawled in the back of a pickup truck. They're not very high by the time you set them on the edge. I thought, well, maybe what if we build the edges up and we make a flat platform? The roof was round on a school bus, so we make a platform and we bolt on the sides, and then we put the truck cap on top so they could each sit up in this thing on the roof. So I went to a dear friend, Garrett Turborg, a carpenter, up in an area near Trenton. Pulled in there and said, here, Garrett, here's my project. I wonder if you could help me. And so we began to build this thing, and so this concoction on the roof of the school bus became this crazy thing to put a windjammer on the front.
Oh, I remember that little bedroom. We had fun climbing up there. All our friends, or we'd meet them on the road. Everybody thought that was cool. We could climb up there, and I remember we used to all sit up there, all 6 kids, while we were driving down the road, stick our heads out the back, and that was the nicest when it would rain, because you'd hear the rain coming through, and yeah, we had a lot of fun in there.
We were, one little story in conclusion. We were driving down the road, down the state, one of those interstates, and all the transports were going by me. And every time a transport would go by, they would honk their horn. And I thought, something's wrong with the bus, the lights or the tires or something, and I'd pull over and look and couldn't get in, and then another transporter go by. And I looked up on the roof, and there was all 6 kids up on the roof of the bus driving down the interstate, and their little hands out the window, for the transport drivers to honk their horns. I can imagine what those guys were saying to each other on their CB, "Oh, you crazy Canadian, man, you gotta see this. You got 6 kids on the roof of a bus in a pickup thing. And, well, I've never seen anything like it in my life."
You think that thing would pass the safety nowadays?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But the interesting thing is the school bus, we got away with it. It said whatever amount of seat belts it came with, that's what you needed. So we had 1 seat belt in the school bus. And I'd taken the front seat out and I'd taken a van seat and put it at the front. And all you kids would come up to the front and sit there. The whole family would all clamor around. We would drive down the road at nighttime through the big cities, and all you little kids up there.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Having fun up there driving.
I remember driving through cities at night, sitting in the front with you,
talking.
Just sitting out there. I used to like the city, all the lights, driving at night.
You guys would say, "Let's drive all night, Daddy. Let's drive all night." Yeah,
When's Dad going to sleep, though?
When, kind of you guys would start dropping off. You go back to your beds, and then Bonnie would be over there. Her head would be doing a bobblehead, and then about 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd be all by myself thinking, why in the world did we decide to do this drive all night foolishness? That was back in the day. I didn't even drink Tim Hortons coffee, and that what got me on Tim Hortons coffee. I didn't even like it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When did you start drinking coffee?
Yeah, it was way back then with the bus days.
Yeah.
Found out. Well, it's been a real treat to be able to share some of our journey and God's provision, God's miraculous ways been a part of our lives. So many more miracles. I've got more stories of His provision, of breakdowns and how He provided. Money on the road. Guy pulled up one day and saw me filling up the bus. He said, "Hey, I'll fill up that bus for you." I said, "Are you sure?" "Yep." He paid for the whole gas tank.
Just some guy from the gas station.
Yeah, another time I made a really big mistake. This is a lesson I learned. We drove into this town, and I figured, I better get gas before we go into town. And we were going to be there for a while. And I drove in, and the first place we were going to was a farmer's place, and he says, "Bring that bus over here. We got the big gas tank there at the back. We'll fill that thing up for you." And I thought, I just filled it up. From then on, I never drove into town full, Maybe, just maybe, I mean, he didn't say, "Oh, well, that's too bad, brother. Here's $100 instead." No, he didn't do that. He was, "Oh, that's too bad. I would have filled that up for you." Yeah.
Maybe
Lord,
next time.
God has been good, faithful. Thanks, Amy, for this opportunity to share some of these stories of God's goodness and provision.
It's nice to hear them.
Never seen
the
righteous forsaken. We got that promise on our the sermon on. We went to church. We had our honeymoon got married on Saturday, and we were a good, dedicated young couple that we went to church on Sunday morning. After our honeymoon night. But the Lord gave us a promise that night. He said, "You've never seen the righteous forsaken.
There's descendants out begging for bread."
Or begging for bread or gas.
Well, thanks, Dad. And it's been a pleasure to have this time to talk about some of the fun memories from the past, and just to think of all the ways God has provided over the years. And
He's still the God of provision today. He's never changed.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you.